Hey, Heart Seekers, welcome to the Heart's Hello Show, a space where truth meets tenderness and your journey back to yourself begins. I am your host, Kiana Talena, and around here, we don't do surface. We get real, we go deep, and we speak to the parts of you that you thought no one saw. Whether you're in a season of rediscovery, rebuilding, or just trying to breathe again, you're safe here. Let's unpack, unlearn, and unlock who you were always meant to be. Life, life doesn't usually change overnight. It nudges you first. It whispers. It makes you uncomfortable. It shows you what isn't working. And for most of us, we stay anyway. We stay in relationships too long. We stay in jobs too long. We stay in spaces that stopped growing us years ago. Not because we don't know better, but because leaving requires courage and staying feels familiar. So today I want to talk about the turn, the pivot, the detour, and why sometimes the hardest thing you'll ever do is admit that the life you thought you were building isn't the life you're supposed to stay in. See, we grew up believing that life is supposed to move in a straight line. We meet someone, you build a life, you create stability, you settle into what you thought would be forever. And then one day something shifts. Not all at once, not dramatically, but slowly, quietly, consistently. You start realizing something feels off. Something feels missing. Something in you is no longer being fed. And here's where most people get stuck. They don't get stuck in the change. They get stuck in what they thought was supposed to happen. They mourn the version of life that they imagine more than they honor the reality they're living. I could be a poster child for this. You all know that I was in a 20-year relationship, a 14-year marriage. And for most people, walking away from that would mean they have to question their whole life almost, their whole adult life. That was me. My adult life from college was this relationship, 4 children in, 2 decades. And you still feel that that push and that pull of something just isn't right. And here's the truth that most people avoid is that you usually know something needs to change long before you actually move. You feel it, you see it, you sense it, but you sit. You sit because you've invested years here. You've built history. You've grown comfortable. You don't want to hurt people. You don't want to start over. And the longer you sit in a space that no longer fits you, the heavier it becomes to leave. Because now it's not just a decision. Now it's a life you built, a role you played, an identity you wore, a version of yourself that you promised to protect. And so walking away doesn't just mean change, it means grieving what you thought would last. And I can admit that I got stuck in that space as well because I'm like, you don't just walk away from 20 years. You figure it out. You see how, what can be worked on. But if you're being honest, if you've been working at it for 20 years and it still isn't working, it probably is not going to work. It probably is that you did the best that you could with what you had at the time. And so when you begin to grow, when you begin to learn, when you begin to want more, when you begin to see that those things that sometimes you thought you were at the carnival, those red flags, and they're now waving real heavy and strong. And you're like, were they always there? Yes, they were. Those things that you try to avoid, those conversations that you try to avoid having. But ultimately, it just gets heavier and heavier. You begin to show up and just smile. You begin to smile through the pain. You begin to smile through the hurt. Everything begins to be a performance. And you don't know what to do. So you just kind of sit. And for some, you try to figure out, well, do I continue to fight or do I let it go? And this is the question that people don't ask aloud, because if you ask it honestly, you might not like the answer. So when do you fight for something? And when is it just time to let it go? Because not everything is meant to be abandoned and not everything is meant to be saved. See, some things require work. Some things require patience. Some things require uncomfortable conversations, but then some things are already over and you're just the last one holding on. Or in relationships where you have two people who just know that, oh my gosh, I've given it all that I possibly think that I could give. And so both people are just holding on by a thread. It just makes me think of even the story of the big bad wolf, where he goes to different houses that are made out of different things and just a huff and a puff to blow it down. See, sometimes those are the relationships that, not just relationships, but things that we are just holding on to. And with one strong wind, it would be gone. So again, there are some things that do require work, and then there are some things that require patience, and there are some things that, again, we just have to have those uncomfortable conversations. And so a lot of people don't stay because they're committed. They stay because they're scared. Scared to start over, scared to be alone, scared to make the wrong choice, scared they won't find better, scared they'll regret leaving. Hand raised for me for all of those. Can you imagine walking away from something that you were in for 20 years? Can you imagine the idea of starting over? Having to learn someone else and for someone else to learn you? Or thinking that, is this the right choice? See, all of those things I have lived, all of those things have gone through my mind. So they tell themselves they're fighting. They're fighting for it. But are you really fighting? Or are you just delaying a decision? See, before you walk away from anything, a relationship, a job, a friendship, a situation, there are some hard questions that require honesty. Have I clearly communicated what I need? Not hinted, not hoped they'd notice. Have you actually said it plainly? Have I given this space a real chance to grow, or did I emotionally check out a long time ago? Is there consistent effort on both sides? Not words, not promises, effort. See, you can't carry a relationship, a role, a situation alone and call it working on it. That's not fighting, that's surviving. And I'm staying out of love or out of fear. See, if nothing changed, could I live like this for another 5 years? Am I holding on to the history instead of the reality? And one of the hardest questions of all, have I done my part with integrity? Did you speak up? Did you try? Did you show up? Did you extend grace? Did you put in effort? Because if you haven't, then leaving might just be avoidance. But if you have and nothing is shifting, then you're not letting go too soon. You're finally accepting what is. See, fighting makes sense when there's something left to fight for. You fight when there's mutual effort, when there's accountability, there's growth, there's willingness. But you let go when you're the only one trying, when you keep repeating the same conversations, when your needs stay unmet, when you feel smaller, not stronger. See, staying is something that's already run its course. That doesn't make you loyal. It keeps you stuck. So people think pivots are empowering, but the truth is pivots can feel like loss. When you pivot, you lose familiarity. You lose people. You lose routines. You lose certainty. You lose the safety of knowing what comes next. That's why people stay. Not because they're weak, but because uncertainty feels terrifying. But staying somewhere that no longer grows you slowly erodes who you are. You start shrinking. You start quieting yourself. You start convincing yourself that this is just how life is. And that's the most dangerous place to be. See, one of the biggest lies we tell ourselves is that leaving means we fail. See, leaving a relationship, leaving a job, leaving a version of life. But sometimes walking away isn't failure. Sometimes it's the first honest decision that you've made in years. See, it takes courage to say, this isn't working anymore. I need more. I deserve more. I can't keep pretending this is enough. And the longer you stay quiet, the more disconnected you become from yourself. Because every time you ignore what you feel, you teach yourself that your needs don't matter. See, we talk a lot about what you lose when you walk away, but we don't talk enough about what you gain. Yes, leaving is painful. Yes, pivots are uncomfortable. Yes, detours can feel lonely. But something powerful happens when you finally release what you already know was no longer meant for you. You get yourself back. Hey, you get your voice back. You get your peace back. You get your clarity back. You get your energy back. See, there is strength that only comes from choosing yourself, not in a selfish way, but in an honest way. When you finally say that this isn't working, this isn't growing me, this isn't aligned anymore, my God, you create space. And space is where new things enter. New opportunities, new connections, new confidence, new purpose. But none of that can show up if your hands are still full, holding on to what you never meant to carry this long. See, peace feels different when you're no longer forcing something to work. You sleep different, you think different, you show up differently because you're no longer negotiating with yourself every day. See, courage builds on courage. The first step, the very first step, feels terrifying. The next one feels a little steadier. And before you know it, you're standing in a version of life you never would have reached if you stayed where it was comfortable. See, sometimes it's greater than the thing on the other side, or you're thinking it isn't a person. Like I said, sometimes the greater thing on the other side isn't a person. Sometimes it isn't a job. Sometimes it isn't even a visible opportunity. Sometimes the greater thing is who you become when you stop abandoning yourself. So that detour isn't the mistake. The detour isn't the redirection. It's forcing you to relearn yourself, rebuild your confidence, to reevaluate your values, reconnect with your voice. See, the life you thought you were supposed to live might have brought you exactly to where you needed to be. So you could finally choose something different. Not because the path was wrong, but because it was only part of the journey. So there comes a moment where you can't sit silent anymore, where you have to say what you feel, what you need, what isn't working. See, even if your voice shakes, even if the other person doesn't understand, even if it changes everything, because silence might keep the peace, but it breaks you slowly. And the longer you avoid the conversations, the longer you avoid the life that's waiting for you on the other side. So if the life has taken a turn for you, if things didn't go the way you thought they would, if you've had to pivot more times than you ever expected, you're not behind, you're evolving. See that 20-year marriage? That 20-year relationship, 14-year marriage, I thought was going to break me. Not having the opportunity to be with my children every single day, I thought was going to break me, because that's who I was. That was my identity. Being a wife was my identity. Being a mom was my identity. When I got let go from my position, I thought was going to break me. But all of these things happened so that I could show up to tell you that everything that you have gone through, every hurdle that you have had to jump, everything that you thought that you could not get to the other side of, is working. Every door is opening for you. Where I thought that, what am I going to do? For 20 years, this was my life. But I bought the house. I learned what it meant to be Kiana. I learned what it meant to sit with me. I learned me. I learned that showing up for me and making sure that I am good first is not selfish. I learned that shame cannot hold me. I learned that guilt could not hold me. I learned that being the best version of myself was the best for everyone around me. And that I didn't owe an explanation to anyone else except for me. So yes, leaving hurts. Leaving is uncomfortable. Leaving is can be terrifying. But I want you to ask yourself this question. Are you still sitting somewhere that you already know that you've outgrown? Because you're evolving. Are you still holding on because it's familiar? Because it's comfortable? Because leaving feels harder than staying? I know. Growth almost always requires a turn. And sometimes the bravest thing you'll ever do is admit the version of my life isn't where I'm supposed to stay. See, sometimes the pivot hurts. Sometimes the detour feels lonely. Sometimes walking away feels like breaking your own heart. But staying where you no longer belong will break it slowly anyway. So at some point, you have to stop asking what you should do and start being honest about what you already know. If this episode spoke to your heart, I hope you'll sit with it, share it, and let it shift something in you. You don't have to have it all together. You just have to be willing to be real. Keep showing up for yourself. Keep saying hello to your heart. And until next time, I'm Kiana Talena, and this is the Heart's Hello Show, where growth sounds like grace, and healing feels like home.